And as you all know, or may not know, Lilin manufactures IP security products. And today I've got Joe Dill, which is the BDM of Lilin, and the presentation will be presented to you by Graeme Madden, who is the National Sales Manager for Lilin. So just going to hand it over to you, Graeme, and if anyone's got any questions, if you could table it during the conversation, and Nigel will stop the meeting and just ask the question on your behalf. Okay, thanks very much.
Great. G'day guys, how you going? What we're going to do is we're going to give you a quick overview on the what we call IP Boot Camp, which is an introduction to the Lilin products and how they differ from analog. Alright, just to give you a bit of a background, Lilin was established in around 1980. Back in those days we were manufacturing analog cameras. Since then we've progressed quite far in the last years. We've been specialising in IP cameras. Started off with 1 pixel, 1.3 megapixel, and now our entry-level product is 2 megapixel cameras. Lilin is represented in 13 countries around the world. They're in the USA, UK, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and they've got branch or agents in other countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and we employ just over 500 staff worldwide. Probably one of the largest CCTV manufacturers in Taiwan, and probably unheard of for whatever reason, but in the last 5 years we've been doing a good push into the IP market. What we're looking at is everything more is heading towards IP. Analog, as you're aware, is dying out, just like your old VCRs did, and Blu-ray players took over it. Same with analog camera systems. The resolution and the quality that you're going to get off an IP camera is uncomparable to the old analog. Even the 700 TV line analog cameras, you're going to get a lot higher resolution. Your systems are scalable and flexible, which allows you to lay out your structure and your cabling a lot easier to what you did with your analog systems. And it's more cost effective. A while ago, probably within the last 2 years, the difference between an analog camera system and an IP system, it was probably close to 50%. So everybody steered away from IP. Now with the pricing on products, it's come back down to where they're within 15 to 20%, which is comparable and worthwhile looking at, considering the advantages you're going to get with an IP-based system. The issues that installers normally have, one is they've got a fear of going to IP because they've been in their comfort zone doing analog systems. Other systems on the market have had licensing fees where each time you add an IP camera onto a system, you've got to pay a charge per camera. The Lilin system, working with Control 4, there are no licensing fees on any of the products. So whatever number of cameras for the system you decide to use, you can just add that number of cameras on with no additional cost. They used to have to rely on a PC and software. Now everything's become standard in a Linux-based system. Like with our products, we have a 4-channel, a 9-channel, and a 16-channel NVR that we can record to. And we can cater for up to 24 terabytes in any one of those machines. The setup is complicated, or what used to be complicated, now it's very much simplified. So from an installer's point of view, once you've done the connections of your cameras, you've got them connected up to the NVR, you can automatically scan, it will find the cameras, it will automatically assign their IP addresses, and that's it, your system is up and working. Traditionally, guys have been scared of that, thinking they have to know a lot of different IP addresses. If they've done an existing analog system, the change to IP is no different. If they set up their old DVRs to be able to work and get to the outside world through a router, that's the only thing they have to do with an IP system. Otherwise, they're easier. What we're going to do in this presentation, we're going to go through and have a quick little overview of the differences between analog and IP, and then have a brief discussion about some of the cameras. If there's anything you guys feel like you want to talk about or any questions, jump in as we move through it.
Sorry, there are a couple of questions. Is Taiwan the head office?
Taiwan is the head office.
And also, when it is not working with Control 4, is there a licensing cost to it?
No. No. All our cameras are manufactured in Taiwan. We manufacture and supply nothing out of China. So it is a Taiwanese product. If you look at a lot of the other systems out on the market, whether it be well-known brands like Paycom, Samsung's, 80% of the NVRs or DVRs that are manufactured worldwide come out of two locations. They either come out of Taiwan or Korea. They are the leading manufacturers of recorders. And we are probably one of the probably the second largest, or if not the largest, manufacturer in Taiwan of IP cameras. So what we're going to do is go through and just show what the basic differences are between an IP system, and we're going to look at the pieces that will make up the structure of an IP system. So if we start off and we look at your traditional analog system, you've got your recorder, you've got your coax cable running out to your cameras. The cameras also have a power supply to power them up, whether it's 12 volts or 24 volts AC, depending on your cable runs. Now, if we want to transgress from that to a IP-based system, what are we going to do? So we're going to really remove our cabling, and we're going to go and replace the old coax cable with Cat5 cabling. We're going to put switches in there to connect the cameras to. We're going to remove the cameras. We're going to replace them with IP cameras. When using the switches, we work with a PoE switch, so we don't need any power supply for the cameras. They'll power directly off the PoE, even though the cameras do support PoE or separate power supply. So you can do it a couple of ways, with a PoE switch to power them, or you can use a dumb switch and power the camera separately with a local power supply if you wish. We're going to remove the old analog DVR, and we're going to replace it with a PC-based system or a standalone Linux-based NVR, which is what we use with the Control 4 system. Now, when we look at what we need to consider when we're looking at a system, how many cameras are we going to connect? That's going to determine the size of the switch. We will work fine on a 10 to 100 switch, and we only need a gigabit connection to the NVR. A point of difference probably between the Lilin cameras and other IP cameras on the market, and that would be namely, say, an Axis camera, a Sony camera, a Panasonic camera. They all use a bandwidth which is quite high. They use between 5 to 8 megabits per second for recording. The Lilin cameras, we use between 1.8 to about 2.7 megabits per second recording. Effectively, that makes us 60% less on the bandwidth. What does that mean to you guys from selling the product? The hard drive that goes into the recorder, we can be used 60% less recording space on that hard drive for the same time period as what you would with an Axis or an equivalent camera. So we basically have our switch, and we'll go through these fairly quickly because you guys are more or less network savvy. So you basically go normal rules that we have with any network, 90 meters to a camera, which is fine. If we try and go further, 120 meters, what we need to do then is go and add a second switch in, or a bridge in the middle, to be able to continue on another 100 meters from that point. The way our systems are designed, we don't have our PoEs built into our recorders. There is a separate device. That allows for the topology of the system to be laid out a lot simpler. Just one cable from the NVR to wherever you're going to have your switch, localize your cameras on the shortest cable runs to the location of that switch. So we can just go from one switch to the next and just keep adding whatever number of cameras to build up to the system size that you require. All of our PoEs, or the PoEs that you guys use, and probably we also have Lilin PoEs. There's two styles we have. The standard PoE, which is 15.4 watts per output, or you've got the PoE Plus, which gives you around 25.5 or 30 watts per port to be able to power cameras. Most of the IP cameras, they'll use around 4.5 watts, When you get to the IR-based ones, they will use around 9 watts to about 13 watts, depending on which particular model. A couple of different ways we can do it. We can go straight to our switch, or we can use a local power supply or an injector. What that allows us to do, if we're not going to use a PoE switch, we can local power supply, send it down the coax, split it out at the power camera separately, which allows you to use a dumb switch on an installation. There's no real benefit from doing it either way. A PoE is probably the simplest method of doing the connection to a unit, because connected up, it's up and it's working. It is more costly than a dumb switch and using power supplies, but it comes down to the installer's personal preference in which way they'd like to do it. So there's a couple of different ways we can connect to the PoEs. Probably the most common way is the last way, PoE, straight to the camera, power the camera up, it's all done, nice and simple. A couple of things to consider. When we're looking at the size of the system, we need to look at the frame rates and the bandwidth. All the cameras that we're supplying are all 2 megapixel cameras, so we don't have anything less than 2 megapixels, so it's 2 megapixel other cameras. Here's a quick little chart, and it's not actually bringing up the picture in there. Alright, so when we look at here, it's showing us a difference. The traditional analog cameras that you're using or have been using are where it says 700 TV lines, D1 resolution or standard definition, quite small. The 2 megapixel cameras, we have 1920 by 1080 resolution, which gives us a lot more information within the image, a lot more detail. We need to look at the frame rates. On the cameras, we have two models in the series. We have what we call an L series. So that is a 2 megapixel camera that has 15 frames per second. 15 frames per second is probably adequate enough for 90% of your installations. Looking at someone walking around a room, outdoors, the only time you really need to go above 15 frames a second if you want to count money coming out of a till, or a car moving quite quickly, say in excess of 40-50 kilometres an hour, and you don't want to get any jittering in the image, then we would go to what we call the Pro Series cameras, and they will do 25 frames of real-time recording. Most installations that I see, they normally wind the frame rates back on the IP cameras to around 9 to 10 frames per second on it in most cases, unless you're looking at a car park or vehicles moving. We got any questions so far? All good? When we look at the bandwidth for connected devices, like I said, our cameras will use around 2.7 megabits per second, and we just round that off to say 3 megabits. So if we've got 3 cameras connected to a switch, going back to the main recorder, we're looking at passing 9 megabits down that line. We go and add 2 devices, and we'll actually be streaming to 2 different devices, so we'll actually use 18 megabits. So the cameras will support multiple connections or multicasting. So with our cameras, we can have up to 8 connections simultaneously to the one camera, sending out 8 separate streams to different locations or to different people who can log onto the camera. In this case, 2 devices logged on, we're at 18 megabits. We're on a 10100 switch, so we're fine. Now here's an example. We go and add more cameras to it, and we have 4 devices. So we're going to say it would be either 3 megabits or 5 megabits, times it by 4 for the number of devices connected to it. We've gone to 120 megabits as a total connection. So in this case, we'd be looking at making sure we had a gigabit connection between those 2 switches, so we're not overrunning the capability once we get above 100. Everyone clear on that? In most cases, you'll never come across that. In most cases, you'll only have 1 device connected, which will be 1 NVR, so it will be a quarter of that. That's just given us the example of how we would work out the mathematics for it. Now, we need to look at our power consumption and our compatibility. You guys are aware what an IP address is, and that everything must live within the same subnet or within the same range so it can communicate. So, for example, for cameras 192.168.0.200, the NVR must be in the 192.168.0 dot whatever range so they can talk to each other. When I talk to people, I just explain an IP address more or less as being like the 10 is the street number, the 0 is the street name, the 168 is the suburb, the 192 is the state. If you can't get the correct state, suburb, street name and street number, you'll never be able to send a letter or get anything to that location. And all we do is make sure that all the cameras that are connected are all within the one street. So the first three make a match, and then we've got our cost variations at the end. Here's an example. The PC is set to 192.168.2.111. The camera is 192.168.0.201. They won't talk because they're in the wrong street. Change them to be within the same street. They've got unique numbers, and then away we go. And that's all there is to doing our IPs. And you guys would already be aware of this.
It's a good analogy, though.
It is. Yeah.
I never thought of that. That's very good.
Yeah. Alright, here just went through where it would show you IP config, where it can tell you what the IP address is, and you guys would be aware of that by playing with your network gear. So we'll skip through a couple of these. We have another product, just so you guys are aware of it, we do have a product called CMX, and CMX allows us to bring multiple NVRs within one software. So if we have a 16-channel NVR and we put 2, 3, 4 or 5 of them together and we end up with more than 16 cameras, this one software can cater for up to 108 2-megapixel cameras within the one PC. The cameras and our NVRs, they're compatible with your iPhones and your iPads. There's a dedicated app for it. And we're also compatible with the Androids and the smartphones, so there's an application for that as well. We have other devices within the range, so you can convert analog cameras to an IP address if you want by using an encoder. So if you have nodes, or you can actually change out an existing analog camera to an IP camera and use converters that go on the coax and transmit the IP down the coax. So there's numerous options for doing upgrades to older existing systems. So we get to the NVR. In the NVRs, we've got a 4-channel, a 9-channel and a 16-channel. They are all capable of doing 1080p resolution at 25 frames real time across all channels. Other recorders out on the market, as soon as you get to 4 or 5 HD cameras at 25 frames, you've got to start lowering your frame rate, or you've got to lower your resolution to either standard definition or back to D1 resolution, which is your old analog cameras. We don't have to do that. We can do all cameras at maximum resolution, maximum frame rate. You might see in some slides or literature, if you do actually start looking at the website, that you'll see reference to 25 frames per second, and in other locations you might see 30 frames per second. And I've had people ask me, what is the difference between that? In Australia, we use PAL at 50 Hertz, and we see that as 25 frames per second. In the US or the European market, where they use 60 Hertz and they use NTSC, they see it as 30 frames per second in their market, but it's exactly the same thing depending on which side of the globe you live on. The NVRs, they are compatible. I know you guys have your own touchscreen interfaces. We do have touchscreen drivers inbuilt within the NVR, so any touchscreen monitor on the market, whether it be a Dell, an LG that's out there, we are compatible and have drivers inbuilt within the software itself to talk to touchscreens. Where our product probably excels to others on the market is in the functionality. And once you guys start to play with this NVR and you look at the way it functions, it's been very much modelled on the way your iPhone works out in the marketplace, where you can drag and swipe across the screen, simple icons to make it the functionality easy to operate, easy search menus, be able to do a quick search, find your video footage you want, copy it to USB. It can be done in clicking 3 buttons to retrieve it. we done a bit of a, when we're designing this product, a survey. What is the hardest things that guys have to do with DVRs, their old analogs? And always the one question come up, when we need to search and find video footage for an incident, we've forgotten how to do it, we don't know how to do it, and that was the hardest thing. So we've simplified that functionality within this product to make it very easy to use. So when we're connecting up the NVR, we just basically on the output have our VGA. We have a VGA output on the 16 channel and a HDMI output. We have a USB connection on the back. We have a USB connection on the front. We have our LAN connection, and that connection on the back is a gigabit port for connecting onto the network, and we turn it on. That's all there is to powering up. There's no configuration on the unit itself, apart from just putting your physical connections in there. Probably a lot easier than your old analog products. With your analogs, you would have had 16 coaxes hanging off the back of a box. Now you just got one network connection. Makes it simple. So when we look at the layout of the system, we'll have our IP cameras, our switches, our NVR and the monitor, or in your case, the NVR is going into your Control 4 automation system. Now when we do the addressing of our NVR, the only thing you have to do really on that is just set its IP address up, its gateway, if it's going to be going to a router so it can get to the outside world, and like your customers or you would have had to do in the past with analog, all you got to do is port forward the port number, and in this case on the screen we're saying port 80. As long as we port forward port 80 through the router, that's all there is to being able to see it on your iPad, your iPhone or your Android from the outside world. Now when we want to populate the NVR, it's basically you just go and connect up all your cameras, and just say in the case of using a 16 channel, you connect up your 16 cameras to your switch. Switch is connected to your NVR. We go into the setup of the programming, and there's one which says camera. There's an option there called WS Discovery. As soon as you click on that, it will go out, scan, it will find all 16 cameras for you. If they've all got the same IP address, they'll all show up as 192.168.0.200, which is what a camera is from default out of the box. But it will always find the cameras, because we don't scan for the IP, we scan for the MAC address. And the MAC address is always unique on each device. Then at the top right corner, you can see there's an option which says Set IP. If we click on that, it will say, do you want to auto-assign the IP? And when you say yes, the NVR will go to each camera, assign its IP address, increment it by 1, assign the next camera, and they'll just automatically appear with their own unique IP addresses. So you have no setup to do, no configuration to do on the NVR. Then we've got an option of Get Snapshot, and if we do a Get Snapshot, it will give you a JPEG image of what that camera is seeing, so you'll know exactly where the camera location is, so you can tell where they are and decide where you want them to appear on the screen. And that's basically all we'd have to do, be able to go through and set up the IP cameras directly onto our NVR, apart from just your normal running and being able to use the functionality of the NVR itself. And you'll find it will be no different to any existing analog DVR out on the market or any other NVR. Clicking on your boxes, making it full screen, zooming in on the picture. Apart from doing your searches, you'll find that a lot easier than anything on the market. And getting your information off to a USB, so you can give that to the police, or in the event of an incident, you'll find that's easier than anything on the market you've currently seen. When we want to do our playback menu, it'll come up showing you this, what we're looking at the moment, where we can see the yellow markers on the screen. That's where we've had motion detected. And we can just pick what data we want, put the day straight up there, and we're on the 15th. We can go to the hour, then we can click. As soon as we've clicked down to the minutes, we can set playback. It will instantly start playing back all 16 or 9 or 4 cameras at that exact time of day. When it's doing that, if you've got a USB in there, you can just tell it to record. So while you're watching, it's recording exactly what you're looking at on the screen. We have the option of recording it to a USB. We can record it to a DVD burner, player burner if you want, because we can support a USB DVD, or we can store it to a temporary area on a hard drive if required. If someone thought the hard drive was going to start overwriting and they were going to lose the information, they can store it to the hard drive. It will not be overwritten until you decide to remove that footage. Now when we want to export, we can export a couple of ways. We can export multi-channel, and what multi-channel means, all of our footage is recorded and it is encrypted and watermarked. What does that mean to you guys? It means that the information needs a dedicated media player to play it back. And why does that become important? Because if you have an incident that needs to go to the police and it ends up going to court, if it's not encrypted and watermarked, a lot of times it can't be used in court or it gets chucked out, because normally they'll argue the point, is there any chance this video footage can be tampered, altered or photoshopped? And if you can't say no, then they can dismiss the case based on someone could have tampered with the image. When it's multi-channel, it is encrypted and it is watermarked, and each sequential frame of the image is encrypted with a unique number that's dependent on the number previously and the number after it, and if you change anything within that image based on the pixels, you put the sequence out and it won't play back. We can also get a multi-channel in standard definition AVI, which you can just email or send to anyone. They can open it up and play it with any media player. We can also get a high definition 1080p resolution image or AVI file. Again, you can send to anyone. They can use any media player to open it up. So normally what you would do is you would save it as if it's an important event, save it as a multi-channel encrypted, and then also save it as a multi-channel AVI if you want to email it to people, say here it is, or send it to the police. There are other products on the market which people might try and argue, oh, I can get a really cheap Swan recorder for $900 as a complete kit. The disadvantage that people don't realise with them, their recorders aren't encrypted, they're not watermarked. It's fine if they want to just see someone do something, and that's all. If they tried to take anyone to court and use the video footage, it wouldn't stand up. And that's the drawback to those little cheap kits that you can buy at JCar. And why you should be using a proper professional product.
Just before we go on, Graeme, one of the questions has come from, I can't see who it is, Peter, from Mr. Shulkin, is that we're recording this session, Peter, so this session will be available for our reps to run over. And in 2014 that we'll be running boot camps in several states throughout 2014, which we'll be sending out dates probably early in the year to give everyone plenty of notice. So back over to you, Graeme.
Yep. Any more questions on that?
Right.
Great. Alright, just one other thing to mention as a point of difference between Lilin products and other cameras on the market. You would have looked at probably cameras using IR at night. A lot of the other cameras that you'll see out on the market, when they go to IR at night, they give you a spotlight effect, or like someone's shining a torch down a backyard. The Lilin cameras, they've been made right back to our old analogue days. They've always had a lot of expertise within the IR range. So when you look at our cameras on IR, even the 35 metre, 45 metre, and we can go up to 70 metres IR in standard cameras, we have an even spread of light across the entire view range of the camera, and you don't see a spotlight or a torch effect on the cameras. There are also high power housings that we can do IR at 40 degrees up to 150 or 200 metre IR and fit any cameras into them.
Just a quick question on the actual IC cameras.
Yep.
Are they able to be configured? So I know that some of them, well, I know that they're your ones, but you can be configured if you've got some kind of SD card in there or a snapshot.
Yeah, you can. A good point's just been brought up. On all our camera range, right from the standard definition 15 frame cameras or the L series all the way through, every single one of the cameras does support an SD card. So you can record directly to an SD card. even our tiniest little microdome, which you guys will see later on, that will support a micro SD card. And that can be set up to record on an alarm event or loss of network connection. So if your network connection gets lost, we'll go straight to the SD card. Advantage with our SD card recording, since it was brought up, since we only recorded a low bandwidth, 1.8 to about 2.7 megabits per second, we can use any SD card on the market, from the cheapest SD card starting at $15 all the way up to the black and gold series SD cards that are $50 each. Other products on the market, they specify you must use the $50 SD cards. The reason they do that is because their cameras use 8 megabits per second, and those dearer cards are rated up to 10 megabits per second, so you have to go that way. The cheapest SD card on the market says it supports up to 3.5 megabits per second, which is still well above what we use. So we can use cheapest to dearest when you want to use the cards. Just a quick note, we'll point quickly while we're touching on the cameras. The cameras all have complete sets of configuration within the cameras where you can set your shutter speeds for day, shutter speeds for night, exposure, backlight compensation, wide dynamic range. I don't know if you guys are aware of these, you soon will be aware of all these functions. You can set your motion area directly up within the camera. They are totally custom, you can customize all the settings within a camera if you want for best performance in day and the best performance at night. You've got dual settings for day and night. In 90% of the cases, you put a camera up, connect it up, focus it, get a beautiful picture, you never have to touch them. But if you do come across a harsh environment or where a camera needs to be customised, the functionality is there to be able to go and do that.
Once the camera is customised and you've got it set, is it an easy upload, or you have to actually do it within the camera settings itself? If you want to upload those settings to, say...
You just log in with straight through Internet Explorer, put in the IP address of the camera, it asks you for the username and password, which is normally admin, and the password is pass, P-A-S-S. You're into the camera, you can click on settings, and it updates live. As soon as you click a setting and change it, the options go grey, they come back to black, the camera's accepted that change on the fly. So it dynamically updates the camera changes. You don't have to do a submit or send or anything like that, it does it on the fly. And if you change any of your camera settings like your brightness, contrast, saturation, it's live. So as you're changing those settings on the camera, it's showing you the image, you can see the effect that you're having on that image directly, and you can go, alright, I'm happy with that. If you screw everything up and change all the settings around in the camera, there's a button at the bottom which says default. You click on default, it puts it back to factory settings and you start again. So you can never make a serious mistake. If you get lost, go back to the start, reset it. So here, there's a little product, and with every camera, it's on the disc, it's called IP Scan. The IP Scan allows us to scan for our NVRs or our cameras, and it will bring up all the cameras, and you can just click on them, go in there and configure or change any of the settings within the camera, or you can remotely log into the NVR. When you remotely log directly into the NVR through, say, Internet Explorer, if you don't want to use your iPhone or your iPads, you can look at live screens, you can do remote searches, you can do remote playbacks, and you can pull video footage remotely across the internet if you want of an event that's occurred. So if you've got a customer that you've installed a system for and they've had an incident, you could remotely log into their NVR, get the footage off for them, retrieve it to your end, and then just email them and say this is what you're looking for, so you don't have to send someone physically out to site. These are all the benefits that you're going to find moving towards an IP world with cameras and recorders. The NVRs always have a password or username of admin and a password of 1111. That is standard across our entire range, so nothing changes there. We also have a video decoder. We use a video decoder for if you want spot monitor outputs. And Lilin is one of the few, I think there's only one other company that actually make a hardware decoder. So with our decoder, it basically just plugs in on the network, whatever location you want to put it. And it has a HDMI output, also supports touchscreen, and it can store up to 256 IP addresses, or it can store or clone an entire NVR for like a spot monitor output, and you can decide which particular cameras you want to have up on that screen. Where they can be used, if you've got, as a VPN, we actually use this in our Melbourne office. So instead of them having an NVR with our cameras from Sydney and from Brisbane, they've just got one of these little decoders. They just pick up the IP address of about 2 of our cameras in Sydney, pick up 2 of the cameras in Brisbane, and they've got them displayed in Melbourne all the time. And they don't have to have any sort of recording device, don't need a hard drive, they can just monitor other sites remotely using the decoder. And you can store multiple IP addresses in there. Just one other point to mention while we're just talking about the decoding. The NVRs, where we said they have to work within the one subnet, we do within the NVR have the option, we can enable 4 extra subnets. So if you want, you can go in there and enable a second, a third and a fourth subnet to work if you want to bring in cameras of different system in different subnets. Or another advantage of that, it allows you to bury your cameras a couple of subnets down where they reside, not being on what the main system is. I think that people need to consider, and you guys probably would be aware of this, a camera, once it's on the outside wall, or you give people access to a camera that's IP based, it can become a potential point for a hacker to try and hack into a camera, and it's happened in the UK. Hacked into a camera, reverse engineered the Linux code and used it as an access point to get within a company's network, because it does become a porthole to the outside world. So you can bury your cameras a couple of layers down on the subnets, so even if they do crack that layer, they've got to go up a couple of layers to get onto the main platform. Matter of just expanding the system, like we've done here, we've just added a decoder and pick up whatever cameras we want to go on the decoder. We've got our NVR and our cameras on the system. Add in a second decoder because we want to have another spot monitor. We've added in a PC because we want to bring in the 2 NVRs or all 32 channels within the one software screen. This is all very functional, it's all very modular. You can build it to whatever size system you want and it will function directly with your Control4 product. All our cameras are ONVIF compliant. I don't know if you know what ONVIF means or you're aware of that. Open Network Video Interface Forum. And what that was, Bosch Security and Sony, they all got together and they formed a peer group or a committee, and they said, if we're going to have cameras and IP-based products talking security, we'll create a standard, and we'll call it ONVIF, that if everybody adheres to that standard, we'll ensure that everybody else's product will talk to everybody else's product and you're not locked into the one supplier. So our cameras are all ONVIF compliant. The current version of ONVIF is what they call Profile S version 2. And we update every time ONVIF changes. So if you were going to use either product or a product on the market, providing it was saying it's ONVIF compliant, our cameras will talk to it and they will talk to us. So the systems will talk between each other and products are interchangeable. Providing everyone adheres to that standard. But it's like with any sort of policies they try and implement, getting everyone to follow it and keep to it is quite difficult. But we as a manufacturer do. We do have a website, which is lilin.com.au, or that will take us back to our UK or Taiwan website. There's a lot of interesting, just so you guys are aware, there's a lot of good videos on there and demonstrations where we're showing number plate capture of cars going through at night, driving at 40 or 50 Ks. You'll look at those videos and it will tell you what the camera settings were, what the camera model was. Here's what the frame rate was, here's what the shutter speeds were, here's what the exposure values were. So if you're trying to duplicate any situation, you can look at a couple of those videos and go, well, that's what I'm trying to do. It's a good starting point for me to clone these settings and then take it from there and do any minor adjustments. But they're really good sample and demo videos.
Sorry, Graeme. Pete Crow just wanted to know if there's interoperability issues with different versions of OnViv. Is that true?
There is. There is, definitely. If you go back to the previous version of OnViv 1.1, you'll find they all probably support video streaming, but when you get to things like PTZ cameras, where you can pan and tilt them and move them around, the drivers won't be supported in the early versions of OnViv to be able to do PTZ control over the internet. So there are little issues there that you'll come across. Or they might work, or they mightn't display the correct resolution of that particular camera. Yeah, so it is something to be aware of. We've just got an explanation chart here, and you guys will probably get a copy of this presentation, will they?
Yep.
And it will give you a breakdown of how to really, if you want to understand how our numbers work for the setups of the cameras. So when we look at IP, what is it telling us? That it's an IP camera. It's telling us the housing size, how many megapixel it is. All the cameras start at 2 megapixel as the entry level. So we have nothing less than that, which is basically the standard that everyone looks for now, 1080p resolution. And there's a little chart showing us what the different housings mean, which is the second digit within the cameras. And then we get to the speed domes and PTZs. Right, and that's basically given us a quick overview on the boot camp and overview on the Lilin cameras.
Thanks, Graeme. I've actually got a couple of questions for you, Graeme.
Yep.
Just with the NVRs we were talking about earlier, as far as I'm aware, that they don't come with the hard drives. The hard drives have to be bought separately.
Yep, they don't.
So that's obviously very important that when they're talking to the dealers that they actually stipulate that.
Yeah.
The other thing was, I had a question from one of our guys yesterday about, well, how do we know how much storage capacity a camera takes up? So if you've got a 1 terabyte hard drive in your NVR,
yep.
you know, how many days would that last? And you mentioned to me about the site yesterday, about the app, about storage and bandwidth.
Yep.
So maybe we should let the guys know a little bit about that side of things.
Yeah, on the storage, to give you guys a couple of examples, say on a 4-channel system with 4 2 megapixel cameras that are recording motion detection, a 2 terabyte hard drive, which is what we more or less recommend as the minimum size to go into an NVR, will give you approximately 16 days recording. To look at an example of a 16 channel with 16 2 megapixel cameras, say in a McDonald's store, they typically will use 4 to 6 terabyte, and they get between 33 to 38 days recording on motion detect, and they are open 24 hours a day. They drop down probably 2 o'clock in the morning, it's probably quieter, but they still have staff within the store moving around, so there is activity, and they get it rough. They use 4 to 6 terabyte. On our website, we might try and get you a copy of it. There is actually a storage calculator on the Lilin website, but it's, you go in there, put in the number of cameras you want, what your frame rate's going to be, how many megapixel they are, and it will calculate what it believes is going to be your hard drive size. If you guys have your iPhones, and I think Stephen tried to find it yesterday, there is a little iPhone application, and it's called Storage Calc. And it allows you to just scroll through and say, I've got 2 megapixel cameras, I've got 16 of them, I want them to record for 30 days, and they're recording 100% of the time, 70% of the time, and it will tell you the hard drive size that you should be using. That's a free app that you can just download, and it's called Storage Calc. And that's basically what I use when I'm working out a rough estimate for customers. This is what we'll use. I'll jump onto that Storage Calc. It's very quick, very easy.
Is it CAL as in CAL, or is that what he says? Storage CAL, CAL?
Yeah, CALC.
CALC. Okay.
It's one of my favourites. Yep.
While
you're talking, I'll just find him.
So Graham's just having a look exactly what that app's called, but in the meantime, we're just going to have to take a 5-second or 2-minute break, because we're just going to head down to the showroom where we have some of the cameras on display, and then we'll also be talking a little bit about how the IP cameras will be integrated into Control 4. So just give us maybe 2 minutes just to run downstairs and set up, but stay on the line if you can. Thanks.
Let's go.
We'll take it down.
Yep.
You need to carry anything?
Nope.
That's okay, I just need these.
Store count.
Okay.
And it has a picture of that icon.
No, that's all right, mate, no, man.
This should close it up. And Luke's one as well.
Cool. Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay guys, thanks for hanging on there. I'll just put Graeme back onto you. So we're downstairs in the new showroom. Oh, just got to do this. We're back downstairs in the new showroom, so we're just going to demonstrate some of the cameras. Graeme will go through what they look like and what they do and their functionality, and then we'll see if we can disrupt Luke, and he will then start talking to you a little bit about working with Control 4. Okay, Graeme, where are you? Oh, there you are. So just before we get started, Graeme, we're talking about an app upstairs.
Yep.
So you've got what that's called. Do you remember what it's called?
Store count.
Without
the E, so it's STRR. C-A-L-C.
Thanks, Patrick. She's glad you're here, mate.
Okay.
Really great.
Alright, what we're going to do is we're going to probably look at the little microdome. So in the range, and if I can just show you a picture of him. So you can see him? Yep. He's a tiny little microdome. He's available in the L series and the Pro series, which is either 15 or 25 frame. He's 2 megapixel. He supports a micro SD card. He has a very low profile, so he's basically about just over the 40-45 mils in depth. The camera head, you can have different lenses on it, a 1.8 mil or 2.8, a 4 mil or a 6 mil lens, and they can be interchanged. You can adjust where the camera is looking, 15 degrees left, right, up or down from the direction where you place the camera. And he is an internal camera, so he's more or less, he's a plastic housing. He is also available in what we call a vandal resistant housing, which is in cast aluminium for outdoor applications. And they use it in transport applications like on trains and moving stock. If we go to the next model camera, which is what we call the Vandal Dome. He's an outdoor camera. He is a vandal resistant dome. He has conduit entry on the bottom for a 25mm or 20mm conduit plug, and also on the side, whichever one you want to use. He's very focal, so he's adjustable between 3.3 to 12mm, and he has an IR range of around 35 metres. There are a couple of different versions of that camera in different configurations. From what we're looking at there is a complete sealed unit to like an eyeball or a gimbal style camera. The one we're looking at now, here's what we call he's a new camera, and he's a panoramic camera. And basically what that is, it's 4 cameras in one. So you have one Cat5 connection to it, It gives us 4 images on the screen within the one spot location, and you can adjust each one of the heads of the camera to zoom it in or out, pan it left or right, to when you're happy looking to get a 360 degree of the room. When you're happy with that, leave the settings as they are, and that's what the camera will always display. And I think we'll actually see that when Luke gives a demonstration. Now we've got the last style that we're looking at here, which is what we call a bullet camera. In the bullet camera is a 2 megapixel very focal camera. Again, they're all available in the L series or the Pro series. He has a 35 metre IR range. There is another version of that camera which gives you 45 metre IR, and you can go to 55 metre IR, and you can go to 70 metre IR. But effectively all 2 megapixel very focal cameras.
So from here, Graeme, just before we go on to the Control 4 side of things, I just noticed we've got a PTZ sitting in stock as well. So just to give the guys a little bit of a heads up on the PTZ camera.
Yeah, what we've got here is this is a PTZ camera, hand tilt and zoom. He only needs one network connection to him, and the camera just needs to have power. He powers off 24 volts AC, and he has a focal length around 4.3 to about 97 mil optical, and then he has 20 times digital zoom over that. So if you look at our website, you'll actually see this camera is pulling up objects up to 4 kilometres away with good clarity. And his speed that he can move at or rotate, he can move at 10 metres per second on the rotation.
So thanks very much, Graeme, and we'll try to get hold of Luke now. As you can see, Luke's on the phone, but that's not unusual for Luke. Luke, what's the chance of coming out and talking a bit about Control 4, mate? Is that possible? Yeah, come on, go on here, mate. So, good afternoon, guys. Here we go. I know Luke, I don't know who we have, but say hello to everyone. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about Control 4 integrating with Lilin. It integrates with the IP cameras, similar to a number of other IP cameras out there. Add the driver in, put the IP address, username, password, and then you can get them to pop up. But Lilin goes a step further than the other brands out there. They've worked with Control 4 to make it even easier for dealers to add the cameras in. What Lilin have done in Control 4, they're using the new SSDP, which you'll hear more about that with upcoming Control 4 products and so forth. But what it allows the dealer to do, in Composer, Composer will discover devices on the network, list them there, and then the dealer just has to double click the device. It'll add the correct driver in, identify the device and so forth. So that means with the Lilin range of products, it just becomes a whole lot easier for the dealer to integrate. They don't need to worry about searching for drivers or anything like that. It'll pop up in your discovered devices. And if I have a look here on our touchscreen, I come up to security, shows up our 4 cameras in there. They're just refreshing the images. And I can go and expand them out and get a closer look at them. So they just work the same as other IP cameras as well. And I can go through, this is our 360 degree camera here. That's our bullet camera. And I might try to turn the lights off and I'll see if it's dark enough to get, let's see here.
We don't have any functionality to zoom in or anything like that on those digital.
We'll see if we can get some IR.
There's a version called
to show up.
What's the one on?
So even with all the lights turned off in here, cameras, they still show up fairly bright. We haven't got the IR turning. Oh wait, we do.
Yeah, you do.
Yep, and if we go to the bullet camera, we've got IR showing up as well.
Oh my god, look, it's Pat. Jeez. Jesus. Hello.
And then,
Question.
yep.
Does the C4 app give the same functionality?
Yeah, so the app on your iPhone, iPad, same functionality. I actually seem to have an iPad here.
Don't know if it works in every group. the cameras.
So while Luke's just trying to bring that up, there we go.
On the iPad here, same sort of thing. You get your cameras on there, and you can scan through. Also, as well as just viewing the cameras, there's also functionality to control the Lilin DVRs and NVRs as well. So if we just have a look up on the TV screen over here, Nigel turns it around. On here, it's showing the user interface for the NVR. So what that allows us to do is view the recordings on the NVR and just a central place to view all the cameras on the TV screen as well. So if I change rooms, through the iPad or touchscreens, you can control the NVRs on screen. So you can change your camera views. Also, you can go and cycle through cameras full screen, and also go into the menu system as well. So you can view recordings, set up the settings on the NVR and so forth. And again, the setup of the NVR is the same as your IP cameras. SSDP discovers it, so you just double click it out of the discovered devices list, adds in the correct driver, identifies it, so all the dealer has to do is make the HDMI connection in Composer, so makes it quick, easy to set up, and most of the functionality can be done from iPad, SR250 or from touchscreen. Yep, Android works the same as your iPad interface, so same functionality, you can view your cameras, you can control the NVR, and if the client has a full site subscription, they're able to view that remotely as well. So Lilin have got, I think, an iPhone and Android app, so you can view cameras remotely, but the client can also do it through Control 4 as well, using the iPhone, iPad, Android apps. They just need the full site subscription to be able to view it remotely.
Alright, well thank you very much Luke. Thanks for hanging in there guys. I know it's been a long session, but I hope you've all learned a little bit about the Lilin product. We'll have all this out to you by the end of the week. You all would have received price list by now. So good luck out there in the field. Don't be a stranger. Give us a call if you've got any questions, and I look forward to seeing some of those orders come through for the Lilin products. So anyone got any last minute questions?
Like Peter always has.
Peter, I'm sure he's always got a question.
Can we offer a 4-system set pack?
Well, we can certainly have a look at that for you. So like 4 cameras, with NVR and so forth.
I think we'll do packs for that.
So we'll try to put something together for you by the end of the week and get it out to you, Peter. Any other questions? No? Okay, well thanks very much guys, and speak to you all soon. Bye for now.